When I moved to London, we didn't really have any kind of digital presence. We didn't know how to talk to people, and using social media has allowed me to access people that it was very difficult to do before those tools were available to us. So I've been able to find the people who are talking about EU issues and talk with them directly instead of worrying about intermediaries getting in the way. They can hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. They can comment and react in real time. So it means that as the Commission we're kind of really aware of what the issues are that are bothering people in the UK, and we can make sure that when people are talking about EU issues they're doing so on the basis of fact. How it helps you depends on what it is you're trying to do, but let's take examples from my work. One of the things I have spent 5 years doing is trying to rebut various sort of dodgy stories in the British media about what the EU does or doesn't do. We had one a couple of years ago about how the Commission was going to stop people having catgut violin strings, and this was going to be terrible, and Stradivari violins would sound awful. And this was a big story on Twitter. So through Twitter, I could find everybody who was talking about this and let them hear our side of the story. Now, in the old days, they'd have read it in the paper, they'd have believed it, and I'd have had no way of talking to them. So we were able to shut down, to a certain extent, that story quite quickly because the Twitter, in particular, had given us direct access to people. There's two elements that I think would be really useful for colleagues in delegation. Firstly, we're in a period of paradigm shift here. Everything is changing. And part of that paradigm change is that it isn't anymore that knowledge is power. Knowledge sharing is power. Being the person that people come to is becoming powerful. And I think that's quite important. And these tools allow you to be an expert or to find an expert. And those experts want to engage with you rather than going, no, this is my information. So I think that's very important. The other thing is that increasingly, it's certainly true in the UK, I think it's less true in some other European countries, but I think it's also true in a lot of developing countries, where these tools exist, they're not akin to press releases and TV programs, they're akin to telephones. It's a connection tool, not a broadcasting communication tool. So you kind of have to be there because that's how people are talking to each other. So in a way, you don't get a choice. If you want to not be part of these conversations, then don't do it. But these conversations are going to happen with or without you. And when you're out there engaging with a population, you need to be part of the way that they're talking to each other. And in an awful lot of ways, and I know in an awful lot of Asia, for example, these are very, very important, powerful tools. When I talk to people about why they don't sort of engage with social media, one of the main issues that they have is concern about privacy. Particularly working in an area where there are sensitive issues, for example, even whether that's personal privacy or work, obviously this is something you have to think about. I'd use an analogy of walking down a street. You know there are going to be potholes, but that doesn't mean you don't walk down the street, it just means you watch out for the potholes. So, for example, if I'm going to use, I want to use a form to gather information, well, if it's gathering people's phone numbers and emails, I'm not going to put that on platforms I'm not absolutely sure about. I'll use our internal form tool. Whereas for other things, well, I might say that's only gathering, you know, who's going to which university, and so that's very simple. So I think we need to take responsibility for these issues, to think about what we're putting up and think, is this publicly available information? Is this something I don't mind being thrown back to me in 2 years' time? Or is this something where actually it's a little bit more sensitive and then you're a bit more careful about what platforms you use? So I think we really need to take responsibility as users rather than hoping someone's going to make that decision for us. But I don't think it's a reason not to engage with these tools, because it's a balance of effectiveness and you've got to work out where the balance is that works for you. If I were going to say the ones that I use a lot, Doodle for organising meetings, particularly with people outside the Commission, because yes, we have the Outlook calendar, but when you're trying to organise a meeting with 10 people, 5 of whom are outside the Commission, Doodle does it brilliantly. My Twitter app, obviously, for keeping in touch. I use Hootsuite on my computer, but I don't use the Hootsuite app anymore. Twitter have really improved their own app, so I use that. social media is all about being able to analyse really quickly, and there are some great analytical tools out there. Topsy.com, you just put in a name or a hashtag or a link and you can see who's talking about it, who's retweeting. Crowd Booster is another one. That's a paid app. I have my own, I pay that myself, but I just find it so important to be able to measure what I'm doing, see the effectiveness of it, see who's engaging with me. That tells you the best time for you to send a tweet is. Engage more with this person that just started following you, so that it gives you a lot of advice. Flipboard is brilliant. It's for Google+, Twitter, Facebook, and my RSS feeds. So it's a beautifully designed, and I think that's important as well, things are beautiful, beautifully designed iPad app that you can just sort of flick through like a magazine, but then click into the individual pictures or articles when you want to. Yeah, it's a few.